On July 14, 2018, at Philadelphia's Stanek Gallery, renowned artist and gallerist Katherine Stanek gave a demonstration of her innovative concrete sculpture techniques. Katherine started out explaining how what she does differs from the process of making bronzes from clay models.
Where the creative process is taking place, where the creative decisions are happening. In the bronze process, it's heavy on the front end during the clay period process. In my process, in working with cement and modeling of cement, it's throughout and very heavily on the back end. So the front end is more process and less creative, because I spend as much time developing my design mixtures for what I'm about to do as I do actually modeling with it. It's got some very specific nuances to the material. Now, before I go any further, there's a couple of things I want to mention. One is I am not an expert in concrete. I'm an expert in how I use concrete, and that's what I'm going to show you. There are so many variables. Every time I turn around, there's somebody creating some other mixture that does something else, because it's so versatile that I can't even scratch the surface of what I think it can do. I'm going to be using two different terms, cement and concrete. Cement is the pulverized dust and powder you use to make concrete. Concrete is the hydrated end result material. Think of it like baking. If I'm going to ask for a piece of cake, I'm going to say, will you pass a piece of cake? I'm not going to say, will you pass a piece of flour? And if I'm going to make a cake, I'm not going to say, hand me the cake. I'm going to say, hand me the flour. So the cement is the flour. Concrete is the cake. So I'm going to make a cake for you. So welcome to my kitchen. It's a process that takes several days, and it's hours in between stages. So I've kind of set this up like a cooking show, where I have things in various stages so that you can see steps in the process. But the process I'm showing you is the process that I used to create the piece called Fallen, that's over in the corner there, and the newer piece called Conformity. Concrete is guaranteed to do two things: get harder and crack. That's it. That's what it's guaranteed to do. Everything else is up for grabs, and it depends on what you put into your mixture. So you cannot stop it from cracking, but you can stop it from being a structural crack. You can control it, and you can limit it, and you can use it in your aesthetic if you're working with it aesthetically, as I am. Because concrete has no tensile strength. Steel does. Concrete has compression strength. Steel doesn't. The combination of the two, that's why they make buildings out of these things, and bridges and so forth. The process, though, of adding steel into concrete didn't happen except in the last 100 years or so. So back when the Romans were doing this, there was no steel reinforced, no ferro cement, none of that was there. That's why that stuff is still around, because steel rusts. When I'm creating something that's going to go indoors, I don't concern myself so much with the rusting of the steel and all of that, because it's going to be indoors, it'll be fine. But if something's going to go outdoors, I'm going to be treating the steel. I'm going to make sure that it's sealed off with as many sealers and polymers I can get on there so that it does not rust. So what I do is I start off with a steel armature, very much like you do the armature for the clay process. The difference is my steel armature is going to stay with the piece. And I operate kind of low tech. I want to keep things as simple as possible. So even though it might have a lot of complex things going on, I'm oversimplifying it to do what I need to do, because I don't want to be thinking about those technical things. I want to model. So I found this little fun tool that it works best with 1/4 inch for me because I'm weak. But it can actually do, I'll work up to 1/2 inch. But if I want to create any kind of shape or form with rebar, I don't have to get involved in, I think at one point when I first got started, I was told, heat it up and bend it in a vise. I'm like, how much control do you have for that? Yeah. And then you're weakening it and all of that. But this thing, it's so easy. It's like you can just create any kind of bends and turns that you want, any direction that you want, and you can get it to twist and turn around intricate forms. And if you think you have a little too much on the end, you just simply do that and it cuts it, And the beauty of that is it doesn't cut it sharply. I can drag my hand over that and it's not, so I love this thing. I can, and this is usually for most of the scale that I use, I'll take these, I'll even tie some together to get, but I can create whatever shape I need out of that. So I'll start with the form and the armature. And I'm going to be applying the cement in various layers, not all at once. I'm going to do a little at a time as I go, so it doesn't slump and fall down. But even so, it's still going to want to slump and fall down. So I'm going to put some structure there in the places where I know I'm going to have the bigger masses, like the head and the chest and the hips and the legs. So it's going to look a little like a skeleton. And it does look a little like what you would have for an armature if you're going to put clay on it. It's the same kind of concept. So everything that I learned in these traditional processes in working in clay and plaster and bronze, it's all transferable to what I'm doing. So I'm comfortable with it. I'm going to mix up a batch and do the different stages at the same time. So I start by filling in, just getting a thin layer over the entire rebar. The rebar will rust, even if it's inside, and it will crack more if I don't make sure that every inch of it is covered. So I'm going to show you that technique as well. Getting it in all the crevices and getting it covered up. And after I get that initial layer, I then do another layer where I pack in the masses, still being sensitive to the forms that I'm trying to create. I'm not worried so much about making them exact and finalizing them at the first stage, because I'll be able to do more of that later. So then after about 2 or 3 layers of this, I have a general forms on there. Now, I'm going to point something out to you. I had used this for a demo before, and I was in a hurry. I didn't put the leg wiring in. What happened? The legs fell off because I didn't have any structure that'll hold the material in place, and it just fell. But wasn't that cool shape? See, this is what brought me to working with it to begin with. I was trying to reproduce what I had in a small clay model, I produce it exactly in concrete, and I was fighting this and struggling with this, trying to get this. I wanted to get this feel of this turn, and I wasn't quite getting it, and I'm hammering it off, and I'm adding it back on. I keep going back and forth, and then one of the times I just got lazy and I put too much on and the whole thing fell off. And when the way it fell off, it created this arc right along the hip, or this iliac spine that goes all the way here, and it was perfect. It was like better than anything I could have done. And I was going, okay, I'm done fighting you. Just I'll put it on and you just tell me where to go. And so I just started embracing that approach and letting it happen, and something will speak to me and I'll let it ride and follow it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make a batch of material, and I'm going to make it by hand. Now, if I'm working on something very large scale, I'll have a mixer, big buckets, but I'm not going to be making a batch so big that I can't mix it by hand because I don't have enough time to work it before it hardens. So I'm okay doing everything by hand. I don't need the big mixers and so forth. These are great, these oil pans. I have different ones for different colors because no matter how often I try to clean it, I still get messes in there. So I'll have one for dark colors and light colors if I want to keep the color really pure. So concrete has 3 basic components: cement, an aggregate of some kind, stone, sand, what have you, and water. That's really it. That's all that's in it. Everything else that you can add, take away, subtract, modify is all to address whatever issue you're trying to tackle. You add steel to deal with the tensile strength. You don't always have to have it if you're building something that doesn't need tensile strength. If you want to add color, you add pigment, or maybe stain it after the fact. I like using pigment because I like it to be pervasive. I want it to be there. When I carve away, I want to still see that color. I want to see those layers and that history come through. If you need it to be more malleable, add a little more lime to the mixture. If you need it to be more impervious to water because it's going outside, you add polymers. There's whatever you add, it depends on what it is you're trying to accomplish, what problem are you trying to solve. So that's what I meant earlier when I say I spend some time up front saying, where is it going to go? What do I want it to look like? How do I want the color? What do I want the texture to be? And I create formulas that will create those effects. I'm in some control in that I can direct it, but I'm not in total control that it doesn't still do something. So what I have here is a gelato bucket, but for me it says white Portland on it. And this is marble sand, and this is gray Portland cement. So I use the white and gray together, sort of like a grayscale. If I'm going to be adding pigment and I want to get ranges of color, I make sure I use the same manufacturer, because they're not all manufactured identically, because I want them to cure at the same rate. So I'll use the same manufacturer and I'll mix the two together to get my grayscale. I like to use the marble sand, though it's not always, and sometimes I prefer the other. But the marble sand is a nice fine aggregate. When I'm carving away, it gives you this nice granite glisten that you can see reflecting off the marble sand. So I like to use that because I really like that effect. So the first thing I do is mix my dry ingredients together. All of these cups are either marked or already known to me by how much they hold. And I've done these pre-measurements based on weight, so I don't have to sit there with a gram scale and weigh this out every time. I know that if I fill my polymer up to that, that's 60 grams. My water goes up to here for 60 grams. So I don't have to worry about measuring. I can just scoop and know how much I'm getting. The liquids that I have. The first one is water. The second is a liquid polymer, which is this milky white stuff. The liquid polymer is what you add in place of some water, not in place of all water, because it still needs a certain amount of water to hydrate. I add some of that in place of the other, and it gives it better adhesion when I'm working in layers. It makes it more malleable for me to work with. Helps the color in some ways, and if I change any combination of the formula in any ratios, it could have a different effect on the color as well. And then I have here, which is called super plasticizer, which is a step further than polymers. And this is usually used when you want to pour it into a form and you want it to fill. It's a consolidating effect on it. So if you have a really dry mixture and you add some of this, it liquefies it so you can pour it in and gets into all these little details. I'll use it here because I don't want to add too much water. If I add too much water, the excess water simply rises to the top and weakens my resulting material. So I don't want to do that. So I know how much water I can add to a specific mix and what it needs to look like. And if I need it to be a little wetter, I just take a few drops of that, and I mean drops, and it's exactly the way I need to work it. And I want to get like kind of a mid-color up here, so I'm going to do one white. Okay. Now there is white pigment, but it only goes so far in terms of impacting a really gray color. And I'm going to have a component of sand. So I'm going to spend a few moments mixing this up like this. I should be wearing a mask, but I can't hear me. But this is not enough to do enough damage just for this demo. But in my studio, I have a full mask and I have goggles on and everything. And of course, I'm wearing rubber gloves. It's going to be important that all the particles of cement get saturated, because I don't want any capillaries or pockets or any weakness in the material. It needs to be all the way through wet. That's what starts the chemical process. So once I get it to a point where it feels right, larger batches take more time. I now have my dry mix ready to go. I'm not going to add my lime in, another gelato thing. I don't really eat all this gelato, really. I'm not going to add my lime in until I need it, because I can add that at a later point. I want to know whether or not I need it. And the same with my super plasticizer. Keep it simple. Different pigments respond differently. Glue does not take a lot to have taken effect, and it gets airborne, so I have to be very gentle with it. I'm going to mix it first in this bucket, and then I'm going to put it out here to knead it out. So it is kind of like cooking. I'm going to have to knead it. So I'm going to take my water. and then the polymer. All right. So when I said I'm going to take half of that, what I meant was, so I got to remember to speak out loud when I'm thinking things. I know what my tolerance is, the maximum amount of water I can put in a mixture, and I'm going to hold some of that water aside and add it when I need it. So I put half of the water I wanted, the full amount of polymer that I want, and now I'm going to add the cement into this. Now I'm mixing the concrete. Some people, when they're doing it manually by hand, they go right to the pan and start working that way. I like to start in the bucket first because it feels like I can stir it a little more effectively before it starts spreading out. So now what I have is a real crumbly mixture because I don't have all the water in there. And I can tell by how it feels that I do need more water for the hydration to happen. And I know I have plenty of water still within my tolerance.
How much time do you have?
Once it gets mixed, I have a good hour to really work with it if I wanted to. But you can elongate that by moving it. If you're working in plaster, for anybody who's had plaster experience, you'll know the more you agitate it, the quicker it sets. It's the reverse with concrete. That's why the trucks are always spinning. You keep it moving, it elongates that setting process without having to put additives in there. So I don't need the rest of my water, so I just put it in what I call a waste bucket, and that's also something that is real common. So now I have something more familiar, what you're familiar with, but that's not what I want for this, because this is going to fall off. Now, one of the things when I'm working with the polymers is if there's just water in there, this will just fall out and break out when it cracks. But if it's got polymer in there, it's going to stick to the sides. So I try to clean my buckets right away so I can reuse them. So I just get some water in there, and totally wore the wrong shoes.
Do you ever use fiber to rinse?
I do use fibers for it, not on this scale.
No.
It's too small a scale to worry about it. I try to understand every ingredient's function. What is its purpose? If it is no business being in there, what's the point? I'm just creating more work for myself. If it does, if the purpose, in this case, the purpose is it gives it a tensile strength, gives it a surface tensile strength. So it reduces cracking. I don't need to worry about cracking on this scale. Not like that. So if I was doing a hollow casting or something, or I was doing a large surface, I'd put fibers in. If I was casting salad, I would put fibers in it. When you're doing larger things, you're going to alter your combination of materials. You're going to have larger aggregates. It's all proportionate to the scale that you're working. So I'm not even close to finish mixing this, but I'm going to add some pigment to it. Now, pigments can be added at any stage. You can add it to the wet mix. You can add it to the dry mix. You can add it at the end like I'm doing. You can add it at different stages. I only used a tiny bit. You'll notice I poured it into the lid first. I'm just getting my pigments mixed in there. I use pigments made for concrete. This is a concrete manufacturer who produces stains, acid stains. Everything's designed for concrete. Now, the reason I like to do that is I want to trust the experts, and they make sure that they're light fast, it's sustainable in this high alkalinity environment. So it's turning blue.
And would you use less gray? Would you use less gray if you wanted more blue?
If you wanted it more brighter blue. It's not about whether it's more blue, it's how bright it is. It's like I said, it's your grayscale. Now I actually have, it's actually a little too wet for me to work with. I need something a little more malleable, less runny, if you will. This is where I'll add some of my lime. And again, I'm not going to go overboard right away. Now lime will also, because it's going to accelerate some of the cure time. With concrete, the slower the cure, the better. This is not quite right. I need just a little bit more lime. Now, as far as the proportions are concerned with the lime, I can actually have put in 2 parts lime to 1 part cement. So my tolerance, I could put that whole bucket in here if I wanted to. So I'm not worried about measuring it out. I'm just trying to get the consistency that I want. So I'll know when it's the right consistency when I can squeeze it and it'll hold its form. It's not quite there.
Why don't you just use more sand?
It doesn't stiffen it up. It simply adds more texture. This stiffens it up for me. This makes it more clay-like, whereas the sand will keep, it might not run as much, but it won't be any more usable or malleable. Okay, it's almost there. Now, if I wanted to mix my colors and I wanted to be more green, I can just add more yellow to that and get a green color if I want. Now, this is close because it's not falling, but if I can go like this and it does that, it's not quite where I want it to be. So I just want just a little bit more.
What's too much?
2 of these.
Oh. What's it do when it's too much?
It breaks apart and it's dry and frozen. And you can't work with it that way. It's getting there now.
Yeah.
So now it's getting close to what I want. Now I want to make sure that everything is completely mixed. I don't want to get any part of it. And what I'm doing is I'm bringing moisture to the surface. I'm making pasta. That's exactly what I was thinking about. I took a cooking class when I was in Italy. And I was making, and we did the, mixing, and I'm like, oh, this is the cement. Oh, this is the water. This is the polymer. Okay. So now I've got it at a state where it's going to sag a little,
Nice.
but not too much. So, but this is what I want for this stage. Now, I'm just wetting some of that so I can get some of the exposed rebar covered. Right? And then I take a couple handfuls here, and I go into my form there, and then I do what I was doing when it was in my hand, because now it's settling into the details. It's getting nice and deep inside there. And then I can squeeze it. Now I have confidence that it's right up against that rebar, and it's holding its place.
There we are.
So I'll do that again for the next section, but before I do, I don't want this falling out of place. So I'll take the next section, take a couple of things, squeeze it in there, and just, this is akin to, if you see them mixing and putting the vibrating the bucket, and then getting it to settle into place. So now I have it's not pretty yet. It's a pretty color though, isn't it? I want to get just this this doesn't have as much to go through, I can usually squeeze it in that one. It's the ribs and the pelvis area that I need to be more concerned with. So I want to just get enough material in there so that when I do my next layer, I can actually start thinking about those forms. But I also have to be mindful of the fact that this is a neck here. I don't want to have too much layer on there. It's going to build up without me even trying over time. So I'm just going to remember to keep that in mind when I do this. But now this is the good modeling stage. It's not really settling too much, and I can squeeze it, and it's going to hold its shape. So while this is, that's about all I can do on this before things start falling apart.
Can you go back and work on these after it's dry?
Yeah, this was done a long time ago. So because it was done a long time ago, and I'm in between while I'm talking and while I'm doing things, I'm just kind of squeezing and keeping this moving because I want to keep working it. So it's at the perfect stage now. I want to be able to continue to work it. So now I'll take a little bit of my polymer. I'm keeping the lid on because as soon as air hits it, it starts to harden. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to just go over where I want to put this.
Also, that acts as like an adhesion.
Yeah.
In the subsequent layers.
Yeah, and I don't want to overdo it because it's going to also weaken it if I have too much going on. So I have plenty of layers going on in here, and I want to build up a little bit more. So now I still don't have wire. I could add wire. The problem is I'd have to tie it up, and then I'm going to have the wires going to be too bulky for this scale. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to just get a nice layer put over this. I'm not worried about the mess. It's messy. It's okay. And what I have here now is a fiberglass cloth. And what it's going to allow me to do is what I failed to do the first time around, is I'm going to use it to fill that in. And the reason why is it's going to hold it in place. This is really small scale. I don't need major armature. I got this. It's going to hold things in place for me, but at the same time, when I come back and I want to edit it, I just cut it and remove what I don't need. So it's going to serve two purposes for me. And it can stay there. This is akin to the chopped fiberglass. It has the same effect in that it keeps this cracking down and holds things in place. So I'm going to put a little volume on, but I want to get a mass on there for purposes of demo, among other reasons. And it's important that it be packed in. Now I'm going to put my fiberglass on, and then I'm going to marble right over that. Not worried about the excess. I can cut that off later when I get it's hardened and I have time.
Is there a torch?
No, because that heat will damage the material.
Oh, yeah.
It causes it to explode.
Yeah, it cracks, and if you have any air pocket at all there,
Oh, yeah.
it's going to make that pop and create a problem. But you see how it's allowing me to put in some volume without it falling off, even though it's kind of still a wet mixture. But I have to make sure that I don't have any air pockets going on there, because when I go to carve it later, it's just going to fall right off. So I'm being mindful of my forms along the way. because I know where generally what those are going to be. I can always carve those later, but if I want to start changing directions now because the material says, no, bring that leg forward. No, bring that leg forward. Right. Now, if my material starts getting too hard too fast, that's when my plasticizer will come into play. Even if I'm doing multiple layers in a single setting, I first really scrubbing in there and grabbing the surface. Then I can actually build forms. It's harder to scrub in. But now it's got some real hold. Oops.
Do you ever recombine your droppings?
I do, as long as I know that I don't have any too
Hard
much
spot.
other stuff there. But now is when I can actually start building some of the forms. I'm going to start building the shoulders out eventually, so I'm going to have to put some foundation there. Again, I'm being mindful of the anatomy. I don't want to do extra carving with it, but some carving is fun. So,
Katherine, do you polish the surface after it's, is that how you achieve the surface of one of your smaller works over here?
yes, it is. It's stone at a certain point. So now I can just start carving into it with my fingers. I'm going to make sure that. See, I'm working it too much. See that cracking happening?
Oh, yeah.
I'm working it too much. So when that happens, don't force it. Take it off. Now it's getting too hard to work with. It's crumbling. So I'm going to just need a little more working time. And that's partly because I added so much line in there.
Oh, yeah.
So you add some polymer?
I'm adding this super plasticizer. And I'm adding,
Super polymer.
that's how much I need to add to this amount. If I added any more than that, it will pour like milk.
No.
So, now I'm back to my, wow. It went from crumbly to that now. So I'm back where I want to be with this last little bit. So then I can add these crumbs into it. And continue to put this back on and then leave it alone. Not play with it too much. And I don't want to add water to it because if I add water to it,
It weakens it.
it's going to weaken the material. So let me recover from my last blunder.
I read the Romans used like ash from volcanoes,
Yeah.
from Vesuvius.
And
we don't do that in our
we do.
culture, do we? Oh,
Yeah. It's definitely an additive that's used
Oh, yeah?
now. In fact, I use the volcanic rock for lightweight aggregate because it's air, so airy. It weighs a fraction of the other. I had to do a casting that was really big one, and we had to lift. We were mixing 75 pounds at a time, and to keep it manageable, we can lift it over our heads. We used lightweight aggregate.
But don't you run into some issues with getting the cavities and the volcanic material fully saturated with the?
No. It does. I mean, if you're
it is. You can affect the penetration of the cement.
if you don't cover your armature thoroughly, and there's air pockets around the armature, that's going to be a problem because the steel will rust. When it rusts, it expands. And it expands, it creates these hollows, and then it goes all the way to the surface. So you see, like rebar, you always looks like somebody hit it. It's popping from the inside out. So it is a problem in that, but there's nothing, the volcanic rock isn't rusting. There's nothing in it that's going to cause it.
Right,
In
it's
fact, they actually, to have some room for expansion and contraction, especially in freeze thaw, would be better for it.
Right.
Especially if it doesn't rust or have any other things going on there. So now I'm going to come back to this one and show you how I would still add more volume to this piece. And I put her neck in totally the wrong spot.
Oh, yeah.
So in my studio, I would spend a little more time just kind of double checking my proportions and measurements, but for the demo. Now I want this to not sag and fall off. And I want to just model it a little bit more without it doing that. So I'm going to wrap it up in this plastic.
So it slows down the drying.
No, it
Cure.
just holds the shape.
Oh, it holds the shape.
It doesn't sag now. Now I can do squeeze my forms into place without it falling off the armature. And then, exactly what you said, after I do this, and I get this where I want it, I just leave the plastic in place to hold it till it cures. So I've got my shapes there, I got my position there, I got my forms where I want it, and I'm just going to leave the plastic on so it doesn't fall off. The material, that is. And I'll do the same thing over here. It's already starting to cure. Now, while that's setting, I'm going to clean my book. I like my pan, and I want to be able to use it again.
Once it cures, can you add another layer?
Yeah. That's exactly how I work, and I'll alternate my colors with every time I do another layer. So there is some conscious decision about, I want this underlying blue to come out, so that's why I'm putting it on first, or I want the surface to be blue, so I'll put the red underneath. It really depends what I'm going for. So, plasticizer. The manufacturers always send with the materials the design mixture, what the maximum amount is in proportion to the dry materials and so on. So I just follow those, and I know how much I can add safely and still have a good stable mixture. This is excess material I had. I just threw on there. I put some mesh there so it would hold the shape. So I've got kind of a foundation for a mini portrait. I have different spatulas for different colors. I do that if I care that it's a certain color. If I don't and I want to have a surprise, I don't worry about it. So I'm going to mix another batch using a different bucket for a lighter color. Now if I keep using the same bucket, it still has some moisture in it. So I know I have to cut back on my water content when I do that, because it is that finicky. Half, and then I'll do the other half. And then keep a stack of paper towels handy because I don't want to stick my wet hand into the dry bucket to mix up my dry materials. So,
This is color.
not just the color, but the moisture. Yeah, I want it, if it doesn't saturate at the right consistent rate, you could,
You really get your mileage out
Yeah.
of those nitro.
and now I've got blue on these gloves, so
Yeah.
if I don't want blue in this,
You
I gotta
change
change
gloves.
the gloves. But I'll save these for when I go back to blue.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Hard to get back on, aren't they?
Yeah, little baby powder. Now when I'm casting, what I'll do is I'll have a really thin gauge glove, and then I'll put the thicker gauge glove over the thin, and when I'm doing a big bucket and I have to get my hand in there to get it all mixed in, but then I need a clean hand to do what I need to do next. I just tear off the first layer and I still have a layer underneath. So now I'm going to mix my dry. I'm going to put a little less sand in here because I can, it's small scale, and because I want to be able to model some fine detail with this. And the less sand I have in it, the more I can. But I still have to have some sand. If I don't put any in there, it's just going to crumble.
That comes in other colors too, I guess, right?
The sand? Yeah, you can get different size.
Marble.
Yes, different size, different shapes even, and scale. Yeah. So for the purposes of demonstration, I'm not going to be mixing as long as I normally would mix. It's good enough. I'll use this. So now I'm going to put my liquid into here. Get the water that I need. Now this is going to be a drier mix because the cement's going to suck up that moisture right away because the ratio is a little different. So I'm mixing a little at a time in there. It just helps me feel like I've gotten it mixed a little better. So again, I've got a nice dry mix. I didn't add all my water into that. I did add all the polymer. I think I need a lot more water though. This is where I'll, it's definitely going to be a lighter mix, lighter in color. So if I were to take the blue now, it would be brighter. Extra sand or extra cement in the mixture will give you a drier mix. I'm going to be using some plasticizer, super plasticizer, to get it where I need it to be able to work. So it's really crumbly and dry. Agitating it like that distributes things more evenly. And this is exactly the mix that I want for what I'm about to do, so I'm not going to add plasticizer to it. Crumbly, and now it's sliding off my surface. Alright, so now I'll add some yellow.
Like a flaky pie crust.
Right. Now the yellow goes pretty far too, so I don't want to go too much on the yellow. And something else I learned right away is always put the lids back on before you start mixing. Because you never know when things are going to go flying. All right. Now, if I wanted my color to be really evenly distributed, I would add it to the wet mix before I added the cement material. But I don't mind sometimes some streakiness or cloudiness or something. And it's a nice light color. It's okay because I'm going to be working on a horizontal surface, so I'm okay with that. I want it to be movable. I have it on this plastic for a reason. First, I want to scrub in my surface. This blob here was only made like a day ago, so I don't really have to worry about brushing it. But I am going to make sure that everything's nice and scrubbed into the surface. So now I have my surface covered thoroughly. I have a little bit of mesh still showing through, so I'll press that in. Fill any holes. I want to make sure that there's no air between the layers and that it's kind of like a glue. And I want to make sure it gets in there, so my first layer, I'm putting my mass in, but I'm kind of shaking it just like I did that one. Get it into the surface. And now I can play around. And this is where the plastic comes into play. When you want to do a lot of modeling at once, when you're on a horizontal surface, you can. So I can start creating my forms. And when I pull the plastic away, I've got the foundation for what I want to do. But if I were to just be putting it on with my hands, it wouldn't hold that very well. But now it's going to hold and stay. And now I can go in with my tools, and plastic knives are the best.
Oh, yeah.
Save your plastic knives for me. Because they have a nice little tooth on there. It's like a ready-made rake.
Yeah.
For the sculptors in the room who are used to going out and buying expensive rakes. And I like plastic because the cement is hydrating through this chemical process, and if you have a metal, unless it's stainless steel, it messes with the color on the surface. So the plastic, I don't really have that problem.
Do you ever use a metal one because you want it to mess with the color?
Yes, yeah. And it's interesting because certain pigments, it gives it different colors. Like there's one yellow pigment from this one manufacturer that when I use a metal knife, it gives it a rust color. Mm-hmm. And it gives these streaks in it, that rust color streaks. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. I think I'll do that. Plastic allows me to do just about anything. Just keeps it just enough in its place that I can get some details going in. Now this is getting a little crumbly, so I'm going to take my pan back because I want to put another layer on here. I'll come around and I'm going to put a little bit of the plasticizer. And this is not even, well, it is a little bit, but it's really got a crumbly surface. That's really all I need. And the more I mix it, the more fluid it will get. And I learned the hard way. I thought, okay, I did this. Olga, you're going to remember this. I did this, and I took a spoonful and put it in there. The thing ran like water, and it took like days for it to cure. Wow. It's in there. Now it's more to my liking. So I'm back to where I was for the modeling. Now I'm going to do something I don't normally do in the studio, is I'm going to go in and do another layer, just for the purposes of demonstration.
How long would you have to wait?
To cut into it, you mean?
Yeah.
I would wait a couple hours. This is already starting to set. So I can now come in and it's kind of crumbly, and that's just fine with me because now I can really get those forms the way I want them. And get my planes all set. And because I'm using this knife and it has teeth on it, it's creating a texture that's going to help the next layer to grab. Now, if I have a particularly heavy layer that I want to do this with, I'm not going to go down. I'm going to go upward to carve out what I want. And I'm not worried about that kind of stuff happening. I can fix that. So this is allowing me to continue to refine my forms. I can define center lines so I don't lose track of the modeling I need to do.
And excuse me, Kathy, so with the larger areas, you're going up because if you reversed it and you went down, there would be cleavages that might possibly happen?
I would be breaking the material off. The color I'm using to patch the section is actually adding some interesting detail to the composition. If I were to come in and carve this now, it's too soft, it's too early. The blue I can carve. Be patient, wait. I'll have a couple things going on at once. I'll set my day up in such a way that I'll come in, I'll do the first layer, I'll leave, take care of errands, work on something else, then I'll come back to it, and then I'll do my next layer, leave. I'll do 3 in a day, typically. Not usually more than that unless I'm really pressed for time and I have to get this done. And then I might do 4, but 3 in a day is good because it allows me to get to the carving stage 3 times. And then I wrap it up and come the next day. And when I come the next day, I'm going to have something harder and easier to work with when I'm adding additional layers. Now this is horizontal, so I can actually cut into it now and get some real nice details. And start setting it up for the next layer. Now, I do need to know enough about what I'm going to do the next round so that I can give some texture to the areas that I want to create, add layers to that. So now I can go in and carve and add more detail to that. So when you're finishing it at the end, and this is hardened and I want to do some finishing work, I will go in with abrasives, sandpaper, files, chisels. I treat it like stone. So I can high polish finish it if I want. I can keep it textured if I want. If I chisel it away, I can leave the chisel marks. I can sand them away. It's really up to whatever I want to do with the composition. The works that I did here, I left a lot of the chisel marks because it was those pieces were about the history. He's fallen, for instance, capturing moments in time as the figure is falling. So every layer was based on the different position of the model. So the model's leaning over a little bit more. So each layer has that surface in a different position. I wanted that history there, so those chisel marks, the lines I would make and all that was good. I left them there. It's a porous material. Even if it's indoors, it's always good to seal it up. There's an equal number of sealers as there are additives. It really depends on what you want it to do. If you want a natural look, you want it to look like it's not sealed, then there is a thing called natural look sealer. And it seals it up. It's a water-based sealer. You can put it on indoors without any harm. And it looks exactly this color. There are other sealers that actually bring out the intensity of the color. As soon as you put it on, it brings out the intensity. As soon as the stuff starts to cure, it dries and it takes on a color that's more chalky. What you see when it's wet, how it gets darker when it's wet. There are sealers that bring out that rich color. So if I wanted that color, I would use those kinds of sealers. If I wanted it the raw color, I would use the natural look sealer. The ones that bring out the color are almost always glossy. There's one that's satin, and even that's kind of glossy. The natural look sealers and the others, you can get matte. So it doesn't have to be glossy. And if it is too glossy and you need that kind of sealer, a little bit of wax goes a long way. Because you can take the wax to dull it up a little bit. And it's just another sealer, so it's okay. I read this book, I'm going to reread it again, because I don't think I got all the nuances of it, called Concrete Planet. He's citing facts and everything, but people challenged the notion. But that concrete existed like 20,000 years ago. Not maybe purposely, maybe somebody had some limestone that got pulverized in, making some kind of tool, and then they spilled some water on it and burned themselves. And why am I burning? What is this thing? And then it gets hard again, and they're going, wait, I just add water to this and it gets hard, and then they discovered concrete. At one point, I think they found some surface that they attributed to like 15,000 years ago that had a concrete floor. They have it going back in terms of using it as a functional material. I think in Asia, it goes back even longer than the Egyptians in using concrete. Egyptians used a form of concrete, but Romans made it popular. So it's really the Roman era where it really became used widespread for a lot of different things. But some selfish innovators decided not to document and share. There were a few that did, and I'm trying to find somebody to, George, translate a book for me that will help you, because they found an old manuscript that I believe revealed the real concrete formula, Roman concrete. Adding volcanic rock to it, and it's adding sand, and there's no polymers or anything like that, but it's strong. And one thing they weren't doing is they weren't adding steel. So now they're starting to make rebar out of resin-based materials. Now you can't bend it. I'll use my favorite tool, but it doesn't need to be welded. It can be tied together, and it's supposed to be strong, and it doesn't rust. So it becomes a little more useful. The Romans' use of concrete was widespread, and then it went away for a long time, and it wasn't until like the late 1800s that they started working with it again, and they discovered this book and started working with it again. And then when they came across obstacles and issues, earthquakes, and things would fall apart, that's when they started looking at steel to reinforce it so it wouldn't fall apart.
In construction of a road, you'll often see that they'll use the green rebar,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm assuming that's treated so that it doesn't react as much with concrete.
Well, it's green because that's the coating on it, like an anodized. But the minute you cut it and the minute you bend it, you've just corrupted it. And I don't do much welding with my rebar anymore. I tie most of it. But I did read that if you can't control what's in your welding rod, your filler, that could rust, depending on the quality of the filler rod. You're putting yourself at risk every time you weld an armature. So tying it's probably the best. And since I'm not building bridges that people have to drive their cars on, there's no life depending on whether or not this concrete stays in place, I'm not as concerned about that. I make sure that my stuff is tied good and it can support the material I'm putting on it. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.